So as Nate mentioned, very fortunate to be awarded the Transform 1012 project with Dennis Chiesa of CH Studio and then Barnes Architects, my colleagues, in collaboration with our architect of record, GFF. But that is not what we're talking about tonight. So if you want to learn about their project, then you will have to talk to us later once we've finished it. In the meantime, I'll be running through some other projects that we completed before, as well as a big project we're working on at the moment that's in Memphis, Tennessee, with an organization called Tone. Hence the title, Watch the Tone. So I like to tell people that I'm not an architect, I'm an architectural anthropologist, in that I'm more interested in the way that people gather and the way that we enjoy space and the rituals of space, and use architecture as a vehicle to tell stories through that process. So I like to start with the definition of the word griot, which is something you find in West Africa. And so in my family, the griot was my grandmother. That's my grandmother, Rosie L. Sanders. She's from a very small town in Arkansas. So I can say I'm a descendant of a Southerner. She recently passed a year ago, but she's the one that made sure that our entire family history was something that we understood as we were going forward. And she's a big inspiration for the reason why I do a lot of the work that I do. And so I want to start with showing just a quick little project I did before she actually passed called Rosie's Fair, which is a small little installation that I did. One of the people who I really admire, they're here in the crowd, their name is Carlos Gonzalez Jaime, and he always jokingly says, "You're an architect, but you're also an artist, and you never tell people that you're an artist." And so sometimes I do these small little pieces where I try to tell the story of the Great Migration or Blackness in America. And so this is really my ode to my grandmother, who spent most of her life as a domestic worker working in kitchens, and how in the Black community, the kitchen has a very, very profound sort of lineage in that people do hair in the kitchen, people joke in the kitchen, you dance in the kitchen. But at the same time, if you're a woman, unfortunately, the kitchen can be a place of a lot of violence, whether that be gender violence, sexual violence, domestic violence. And so the reason why it's called Rosie's Fair, spelled F-A-R-E, is because in the South, she was known as Rosie Fair, F-A-I-R, and that she was an attractive woman. And so in my mind, a way of making a pun on that name would be speaking to the toll that women pay in a patriarchal society. So fortunately, she got to see this right before she ended up leaving us. She's still watching over us today, but I like to start with this project as a way of being able to understand the reason why I get inspired through the work that I do. At the same time, we just do fun objects that find themselves across spaces like the Milan Design District. This is a rocking chair called Rock and Roll, and that's actually pool noodles, because how do you talk about Miami without talking about brightly colored pool noodles? But the reason why the actual object looks that way is because if you're in Miami and you've ever seen Carnival, which is a huge celebration of the Caribbean culture, you see massive, beautiful flowered regalias and feathers. And so I thought, how can I turn that into an actual chair that people can sit and interact with? Which, if you're somebody that designs public art, public sculpture, I feel like those things have to be interactive, or else why have them in the public sphere? But don't tell that to a curator, because curators hate when people touch things. So I am a curator's worst nightmare, because I'm always like, yeah, go ahead, touch it, sit on it, smell it. And they're like, Germane, stop telling people to touch things. Because every time you tell them they can touch yours, they want to go touch everybody else's stuff. And then other times we just put massive disco balls in the middle of hallways through Design District and make 24-hour parties. Because if you're in Miami, you're probably at a party anyway. Like, most people do not go there to do anything else. So why not make this a 24-hour location for those types of things? In other moments, we get commissioned by big brands like, say, Lexus, to design installations for them to get people to take Instagram and TikTok videos, because people love Instagram and TikTok. So we came up with this wireframe vehicle, and there's a swing set in the back. And when I tell you, there will always be a line of about 40 people to sit on the swings and take pictures and videos. As the designer, I couldn't even skip the line. So I would walk up and say, but I'm the one that's my name on the wall. And they'd be like, do you see all these people? Do you want to start a riot? So this is the kind of things that happen. But I mean, we enjoy doing these things at the studio. We find them very fun. Or we get invited to do festivals in places like Logroño, Spain, for Concentrico, where we try to turn the city into a playscape. So the amazing thing about tonight is I know a lot of you are architects or design professionals. And one of the things that I've learned is that the best way to get people to your work is to make stuff for kids. Because if you make it for kids, their parents have to bring them. And then you get two for the price of one. So what we always do is design things that allow us to engage with young people, because then they bring their parents or their guardians, and before you know it, we have these interactive playscapes that allow people to do really interesting things. So this is in Logroño. This was there for their weekend festival, and then it came down. But I think one of the things that we're really known for is our ability to bridge the gap between cultural identity and physical space. So this is Ukamba. Ukamba it literally means basket weaving. So in a prior life, I know I look very young, I'm not as young as I look, I lived in Cape Town, South Africa. So this was after I graduated from undergrad. This is in 2009. And my parents looked at me and said, you made us pay for you to go to school to study architecture, and now there's a recession. I think you picked the wrong career path. So I said back to them, but I have this amazing job opportunity in Cape Town, South Africa. And they said, okay, great, incredible. How much do they pay you? It's an unpaid internship. They're like, hold on, wait a minute. So we have to fly you to Cape Town, we have to pay your rent, and give you money to eat? I was like, yeah, but trust me, again, this is the greatest idea. This is a great thing for my career, after I've already made them spend money on me for college. So needless to say, they'd already spent money, so at this point they're too deep in, so they gotta keep on pushing forward, because if I'm not successful, they're not successful. You know, like the car dealerships, like the government gives so much money to them, they can't let them fail. My parents invested too much at that point. We were already past the point of no return. So at that point, send me to South Africa. So they put me on a plane, and while I'm there, I would ride the train out to Rondebosch. Rondebosch is the neighborhood where I work, it's a suburb outside of downtown Cape Town. And we would do work in Khayelitsha, which is one of the townships. So that's where I learned the power of architecture and how it can be transformative. And through that process, I learned about basket weaving. But then being in Miami, it's always hot. And you learn about breeze blocks that you find in the Caribbean. So this was my way of marrying the basket weaving of South Africa with the breeze blocks of the Caribbean. And so it's designed as a modular system. This was commissioned by the Museum of Art and Design. Every single year, they commission one architect or designer to do a pavilion. They're trying to brand it as their version of the Serpentine. And so I was like, you know what? This is something I'm definitely interested in. And so we brought in all of these wood elements and steel, and then designed in such a way that it creates these amazing little images on the ground through the shading and the way that the sun hits it. And then each one of the vertical members were all easy to be assembled on site. So it literally took 8 hours to assemble the entire pavilion, because we designed it as a modular system. And so this was in downtown Miami-Dade for an entire year, and it ended up winning a couple of awards for Best Public Art, Best Pavilion in Miami for 2023, 2024. And as I mentioned before, I'm super interested in how we gather within spaces. So this event is actually a karaoke event. So I say that because I'm looking at you, Irma. I'm looking at you, Reggie. I'm looking at you, Maria. I'm looking at you, Travis. I'm looking at you, Carlos and Augustine. We're all gonna go do karaoke. So the next time I'm here, I heard there's a really nice Korean karaoke spot over by Knox, where we had dinner yesterday. So please get your favorite song ready. If any of you would like to join, you are more than welcome to join our outing. Please have your song already ready in your back pocket. My favorite go-to song is Cisco the Thong Song. And then my second favorite song after that is NSYNC Bye Bye Bye. I do those two very well. This is me singing the thong song. As you can tell, I am really getting into this. I am a terrible singer. Just start right there. If you're really good at singing, you can't come. Just gonna get that out of the way right now. This is not for people who did not get a record deal. This is for people who enjoy singing, but when they sing, the water stops, because that's how poorly they are. So Maria, we're doing a duet. Be prepared. This is how design architects and AORs work together. They do karaoke. So we do these things, but seriously, try to find ways to have fun with the process and how we do the architecture and try to find ways to bring it together. And at other times we do very serious work. So this is Griot. This is a column that was featured at the Venice Biennale 2023. It's made from Spanish Marquina marble. And it came from me winning the Wheelwright Prize and the Rome Prize, where I wanted to look at the history of classical architecture and then understand how to create a brand new columnar order inspired by the African diaspora. So it started as this massive block. This is a 9-foot long by 5 by 5 solid piece of Spanish Marquina marble. When I told the Venice Biennale we were making a column, they told me, Germane, we have a 3-ton limit for the actual pad that's there. If you do anything that's greater than 6,000 pounds, you cannot bring it inside of Arsenale. So we decided to hollow out the inside of it. So that removed about 3 tons from the actual piece. It was fabricated in Madison, Wisconsin by Cora Stone. Cora Stone actually did the monument that Howard Yoon may or may not show in Virginia. And I saw their work and I was like, they're incredible. I want to work with these people. So I did what any millennial does. I slid in their DMs. They didn't answer me. So I'm like, how do I get in touch with these people? I went to their website. I wrote to the contact form. They did not answer me. I called them. Guess what? They still did not answer me. So at that point, I did what any resourceful person does. I called my friend who just knows more people than me. And I said, hey, can you tell these core people to answer my damn email? I want them to make my column. So she calls, they actually answer. And then wouldn't you know it, they write me, oh my God, we didn't know that you were contacting us. Like, sure. So we chat, I tell them about the project, they're super into it, and they immediately say, we would love to fabricate the piece for you. So then we went through this entire process. And it's an amazing facility that they have that's in Madison, Wisconsin. One of the few things that are nice in Madison, Wisconsin. As a Chicagoan, it's just a place you just don't visit that often. And they had this amazing diamond cutter that shaped away the form. And in the end, it became this beautiful piece that has many striations done by hand, which is supposed to evoke hair and dreadlocks and the things that we take very seriously in the Black community as our identity, because our hair really is who we are. Now, when they installed it, you can see the concrete pad that's brand new that was poured specifically for the project, to which they said to me, once we place this thing, we are not moving it. It weighs 6,000 pounds. It's not going anywhere. So they put it there, and they sent me a photograph just like this. I thought this was a rendering. I didn't think it was real because the lighting was done so well. I fly to Venice, and I see an elderly gentleman just riding around on a bicycle. He'd get off the bike, he'd point, they'd fix the lights, he'd ride off again. Just like a blur, like he was a fake, like he didn't even exist. But he was this amazing lighting designer, and he was able to pull this off to where it doesn't even look real, but even the shadows on the ground reinforce the idea of the human figure. And so this is a zoomed in shot of what I meant by those striations that are there within the actual form. And a lot of this came from, when you study architecture, and again, many of you architects know that, unfortunately in a Western school, rarely do you ever learn about the continent of Africa and the contributions of that area when it comes to architectural legacies. However, if you're somewhere that's in Europe, you typically do learn about how the Egyptians had columns first, how then the Greeks learned from them, and so on and so forth. So this was my way of trying to go back to that. And in the end, it became this massive installation portion. When you first entered Arsenale, this was the very first thing that was there. So it was both intimidating, but also extremely rewarding to know that I set the tone for the entire Arsenale in 2023. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was scared as hell. And I was scared because I was like, what if this goes really bad? I'm breaking every single rule of column design in Italy. These people are gonna be pissed. Fortunately, they loved it. It went out really well, and the rest, as they say, is history. And part of that history was Irene Sunwoo, who's the chair at the Art Institute of Chicago, coming to me and saying, Germane, we love the work. We would love for you to have a solo show here at the Art Institute of Chicago, your hometown. Of course, I said absolutely, because who turns down a solo museum show at a flagship institution? And she sent me this picture of the Danteum, which is this field of columns, obviously never realized, but I was super inspired by this as a way of thinking through columns and columnar disorder. But as you can tell, I'm a little quirky, so I married that with Missy Elliott. Because if you look in the background, there is also columns. And then being a Chicagoan, one of the most iconic projects that we know is the Golden Dome. So many people go to Chicago, they go to Garfield Park, and then they go to the conservatory, which is one of the world-class conservatories in the entire country. But if you're from Chicago, like me, and you're right around the corner from there where you were born, you just know this as the Golden Dome. You never think about it as anything other than that. So I thought to myself, how might I marry the Danteum with the Golden Dome? And so we did some sourcing, and we found these floor plans to talk through it. And then as we got through that portion, again, because I'm quirky, I was like, now how can I bring in hip hop? So this is a terrible Jay-Z album. I'm okay standing on the record. It's not a good album. Magna Carta Holy Grail. But I thought the graphics were really nice. This is the Black Panther album, which actually is a good album. But again, I thought the graphics were nice. J. Cole's album, not a good album. But again, you see a theme. I like the graphics. So in the end, when you add all these components and then put them on top of the Pantheon, you have something that's different. And what we came up with was this idea of a field of columns, and those columns would then frame drawings, be podiums, different materials that sort of created this sense of disorder within the actual place. And so I recall an early conversation I had with Irene and the fabrication team when I was doing the exhibition design. I said, can I make a column and can I make it hold the actual drawings themselves? And they're like, how does that work? And so I sent them this picture, and the most amazing thing happened. They told me, we're not gonna do that. To which then this amazing gentleman named Richard, who's on the team, was like, you know, how many of you use Zoom? Raise your hand if you use Zoom. Now, keep your hand up if you send secret messages on Zoom. So I got one of those secret messages from Richard, and Richard was like, I love this. We're gonna figure this out. So luckily, Richard was in my corner. So then this was the idea of how the entire field of columns would look. So there were short columns, broken columns, floating columns, steel columns. And then remember that stripe that we talked about, that we saw from the Bad Jay-Z album, right? So this is the actual gallery. This is the modern wing done by Renzo Piano. As you can tell, there's a lot of glass. And with that glass, it makes it very hard to have drawings in there because it can damage the work. So I proposed putting a massive stripe across the outside of the wall, to which everyone in the museum told me, we are not going to allow you to do that. But as you can tell, I wear people down. And eventually I get what I want. And so now there's an actual stripe on the outside of the museum. And then this was the final design where on the wall you have pilasters of the actual columns, and those columns are migration, identity, and labor. And each of those are inspired by various experiences in the Black community, and hair for identity, wood for migration, and clay and brick for labor. And then you see these other moments around, and so I'll show you what it actually looks like. So you come through this corridor, and you see these miniature models, and along the walls are the very massive full-scale versions as pilasters. With the idea being that every time you're in there, you get a new framed view based off of those slices within the column. So drawings get framed, other columns in the background get framed, text gets framed. And so the real version of it begins to look like this, where now you see the floating columns, you see the drawings in the background, and you see the steel that holds the other columns in front of it. Now, remember I told you all earlier, they always tell me stop telling people they can touch things. As you notice, the ones that are sliced with the middle, those sit at about 32 inches, which means everybody wants to rest on them or place their purses on them or whatever's in their pockets, which then has a bunch of the security guards saying, please don't touch the art, and me getting emails saying, why did you make these this height? Which again goes to my, I'm a youngest child. Part of my life is just being mischievous, just feel like it's what you're supposed to do. And these are more shots from the inside, so you can see those are the 3 columns. That's Spanish Marquina, that's a limestone, that's a sandstone. Those are drawings in the background of the actual identity column within the Pantheon. So it sort of created a collage of the Piranesi drawings. How many of you have ever seen this Oscar award-winning film called Transformers, where Shia LaBeouf won Best Actor of the Year? See, I see hands, I see reluctant hands. But you know that's an amazing film. So in that movie, if you recall, Megatron was inside of the Hoover Dam. And all of your cell phones, your TVs, your computers were all re-engineered because they were basically dissecting Megatron. So these drawings are my way of saying that these columns came first, and all of the Vitruviuses of the world were basically just stealing this information and creating their own Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns. So I always try to find ways to make things just a bit more fun. And then here's, again, some of those frame views in the background. And you can see how, just through the design of the process, all these things get lined up. So you can see how the actual line in the background reaches exactly at the top of the actual column itself that's there on the podium. And there's always this push and pull of understanding what it means to produce labor, to understand migration, and to understand identity. Okay, so why you're all here. So Tone is an organization in Memphis, Tennessee, and a year and a half ago, I received an email. That email was from a woman named Victoria Jones, who is the executive director of Tone. In that email, it said, "Hi, saw your work through Theaster Gates, huge fan of your work, have this project, would love you to be the design architect." Needless to say, I thought it was fake. Because how many unsolicited emails do you all get that end up being nothing at all? Because people love to ask you things like, so I'm trying to design this house. I've already designed the house. I just need you to stamp it. Or, I have this amazing idea for a mobile barbershop, but I only got $500. Can you design the whole thing? You all are laughing because you know this is true. You probably got this email this morning and you immediately deleted it. Luckily, I did not delete this email. I foolishly wrote back and said, I would love to jump on the Zoom call with you. Let's chat. And somehow, I learned about a very small town called Orange Mound, which I had known from music videos and such in Memphis, Tennessee. What I didn't know is that Orange Mound is one of the first free towns after emancipation. And as a part of that, it has a huge history and legacy of resilience and prominence and what it means to be a freedom fighter and do civil rights. And then this thing happened.
All of our leadership staff at Tone up front right now, and we'll have a chance to kind of talk through some of how we're thinking about strategic planning from our angle. Then we'll jump into a conversation with our tower team. If we do our job right on the money, what are we adding to Memphis?
Really wanting Tone to be a safe space for all creatives. I want folks to be able to come to me and say oh, I really want to do this thing. I don't have anywhere else to take this thing. How can y'all support me in this?
But to see you all in the wonderful way you all are orchestrating this is just breathtaking.
So I understand what a person individually goes through running something that's for the betterment of their community.
Hi everybody,
Germane Barnes. I am your design architect for the Tower project. My biggest goals and ambitions for this is to make something that is so transformative, so bold, so beautiful, that it becomes a model for other cities, that it becomes a model for other communities, that people can see. So one of the best days of my life, and this is the lovely Victoria Jones. So Victoria's the one that reached out. She's incredibly brilliant, and she assembled an amazing team of artists, LGBTQ plus individuals that are really thinking about how to move their community forward through faith, through wellness, through health, in a very interesting way. And it's also interesting because they're also so young, to where I, as a young person, I'm older than all of them, so I can say, like, I am the old person in these conversations. And this is the site. So they were able to acquire this massive 7-acre site in Orange Mound and all of these warehouses, to where we're going to convert all of these things into artist workspaces, live work, and art galleries. But that's gonna take a while, so we're only in phase 1. And phase 1 is just only gonna be the north warehouse and the train shed. And so part of this was us trying to figure out, what do they already do, what do they already do well? And as I mentioned, they have a robust offering of services they do right now for their community, where they have pop-up markets. Mama Sundry is its own healthy food and wellness creation. They hold amazing concerts and people hang out there. This past year for the Juneteenth festival, they actually had Dallas's own Erykah Badu go there and do a full performance at the actual warehouse. This is Shorn. Shorn is the arts and media manager, and you see the tower in the background. It's a historical grain tower. It's one of the sort of very, it's one of the calling cards of the community there. And so this is the site. So this is the ground floor of the North Warehouse. This is the tower in the background. On the right, this is the inside of the actual tower. So it used to be a grain factory, so all this equipment is original. It's a really interesting place. The one on the left is one of the outside towers, to where they actually had some of the things there for the actual grain factory. And you can see these massive portholes that are there in the ground. It's really an amazing site. Each of those are a diameter of about 10 to 12 feet. So they're huge. 4 of us can go jump right down like Ninja Turtles and end up under the ground. And then on the right is the train shed. And the train shed is this super interesting location of where an actual grain truck used to go through, to which we're going to make that into an outside sort of health and wellness exterior garden area. This was us in the city. We took the team there to go see the location. And this is us with the Tone team doing some of our community engagement work. And one of the fun things that I like to do as a part of community engagement is we print out all these little program sizes, right, for the client. So we say, here's how much area we're giving to this, here's how much area we're giving to another piece. And then we give it to them and say, can you reorganize these on your site so we can figure out where this is supposed to go? The most fun part of it is when they realize being an architect is not easy, because they swear it's the easiest thing in the world. So when you give them this prompt, after about 10 minutes, they're like, it all doesn't fit. We're like, exactly. So either you're gonna fundraise more or you're gonna cut that scope. You decide. What do you prefer? So it always works every single time. And by the end of the exercise, half the pieces are off the table. And they're like, okay, this is the bare necessities of what we need. And then this is the outside of the site. So when we finish this process, we just finished coming through our programming phase. And the idea is to take the warehouse and utilize some of the work we're doing around the porch and create a front porch and back porch in the structure that's connected with the central spine. That central spine is the mezzanine. And then on the front side, it's going to be a skate park, basketball court, and some other outside amenities. There's a culture of skateboarding and roller skating in Memphis that's getting bigger and bigger. So Victoria told us we could not do this project if we didn't have an actual skate park. So I'm going to zoom in a bit so you begin to see how the spaces begin to overlap and what things happen within those spaces. So the idea is always that a person can come in one time, one-stop shop, and see all these incredible things happening at the exact same time. Whether that be seeing a show in the gallery, a conference in a co-working space, or grabbing food from one of the anchor food tenants, or just seeing a performance from the catwalk above. And so we sent this to them so they can see how the actual spine might work above the actual structure, to where we're going to be able to fit this actual space through the existing trusses that are there. Fortunately, those trusses that are there are also like very robust and very huge. So we've been talking with the structural engineer, making sure we can actually allow people to go through that interstitial space, which they found very interesting. And we're sort of calling it the crown of the project because the mezzanine sits above that higher level. And so you begin to see how all this works together with the mezzanine, the performance, the support spaces, co-working vendors, front porch, market vendors. They were super excited about this, and they've already fundraised quite a bit to where we have to start moving through the project very quickly so we can start finishing these construction documents so we can get this first warehouse actually completed. And this was the thing that the client was the most happy about, because this ability to be actually within the structure, high above the actual space, and then see what's going on so that if a young person comes, they can remain inspired at all times. And then we begin to puncture walls, puncture locations. So this would be within that train shed that you saw before, the pink box being the co-working space for tone, and then the orange being the mezzanine, allowing you to see above. And then this is some of the things that we showed them as far as the actual outdoor area. And so this is what the actual inside of that warehouse looks like. So if you can imagine being inside of those trusses at the top, this is what that space actually is. So we're doing some before and afters of showing what could be there and then what could be there in the future. And what might those food halls look like? And if you're in the actual train shed again, what might that look like? So I promise you all we're going to have time to chat. So thank you.